Laura slammed the designer bag onto the counter and snapped that Jake should stop pretending he couldn't afford it. Jake stared at her, exhausted, asking why everything had to turn into a competition. Laura lifted her chin and said men like him were replaceable in 24 hours. The room fell silent for a beat before Jake whispered, "Prove it." He grabbed his keys, zipped his suitcase, and walked out without another word. The door closed behind him, but the echo of that challenge lingered in the apartment like a countdown. Neither of them could stop. Laura stood frozen, convinced she would win easily. Jake kept walking, knowing this wasn't just an argument anymore. It was the moment everything between them shattered. Jake checked into a small month-to-month apartment on the other side of town, the kind of place meant for people who were in between chapters of their lives. He tossed his duffel bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, replaying Laura's words over and over. 24 hours. Replaceable. Temporary. The sting didn't fade, but the silence around him felt cleaner than the noise he had left behind. He turned off his phone for the night, not ready to deal with whatever storm Laura would unleash when she realized he wasn't coming back immediately. The next morning, when he powered it on, he saw a message from Megan. Megan, Laura's best friend. Megan, the one who always avoided eye contact whenever Jake was around. The one Laura constantly insisted was overly dramatic and too sensitive. Her message was simple. "Can we talk? It's important." Jake hesitated, but eventually agreed to meet her at a quiet coffee shop. When Megan walked in, she looked nervous, clutching her phone like it might burn her. She sat down and took a breath before speaking. She told Jake she had seen the fight, that Laura had been bragging about it in their group chat. Then she opened her phone, scrolled, and pushed it toward him. What he saw made his stomach twist. There were screenshots, voice messages, and long conversations where Laura mocked him, called him a starter boyfriend, and talked about upgrading soon. There were jokes about keeping him around until she found someone with more money. There were messages to other guys, casual flirting, late-night photos, even a half-completed dating profile she had apparently been tweaking for months. Jake felt a numb heaviness crawl through him as he scrolled. Megan said she had tried to warn Laura many times, but Laura laughed it off and said Jake was too stable to ever leave. Then Megan admitted something Jake didn't expect. She told him she had always had feelings for him. Not the kind of confession meant to take advantage of the moment, but the kind that came from years of watching someone she cared about be treated like they were disposable. She said she never acted on it because he was with Laura, and because she didn't want to lose her friend. Now she wasn't sure Laura had ever valued their friendship at all. Jake didn't know what to say. He wasn't ready for anything emotional, and Megan didn't expect him to be. She just wanted him to know the truth, the whole truth, not the curated version Laura threw around. They sat there in quiet understanding, two people who had both been taken for granted in different ways. Jake left the cafe feeling strangely grounded. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't crazy for sensing something had been wrong all along. He went back to his new apartment, set his phone on the nightstand, and finally breathed. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing clearly. Leaving wasn't a mistake. Staying had been. Laura woke up the next morning determined to prove she could replace Jake in 24 hours. She curled her hair, put on her most flattering outfit, and opened her dating apps like she was preparing for battle. She uploaded new photos, choosing the ones she usually kept hidden for special occasions, and added a bio dripping with confidence. Within minutes, matches poured in, and Laura smirked at her reflection, convinced this would be easy. She accepted the first 3 invitations without even reading their profiles. Her goal wasn't compatibility. Her goal was speed. The first guy she met was a gym-obsessed bro who spent the entire date talking about protein powders and his cutting phase. Laura tried to flirt, but he barely looked at her, too busy admiring his reflection in the bar mirror. She ended the date early, irritated but not discouraged. The second guy seemed promising at first, charming and well-spoken, until he casually mentioned he still lived with his ex for financial reasons. Laura excused herself the moment he pulled out a vape and blew smoke directly into her drink. By the time she met the third guy, she was already frustrated. He showed up late, drunk, and asked if she could pay for the Uber he had taken to get there. Laura left him sitting alone with his empty beer glass and walked out of the bar with her jaw clenched. She wasn't used to rejection. She wasn't used to inconvenience. And she definitely wasn't used to the realization that Jake had been far more patient than she ever gave him credit for. But she refused to lose. She went home, changed into something even more revealing, and decided to take the night further. She messaged a handful of men, inviting them over, convinced someone, anyone, would be good enough to parade in front of Jake later. 2 showed up. The first made uncomfortable jokes about her furniture and asked if she could send a photo of them together to his friends. The second tried to kiss her 5 minutes after stepping inside, apologized only halfway, and then asked if he could crash on her couch because he didn't feel like driving back. Laura pushed him out the door and locked it behind him, breathing hard. This wasn't going the way she expected. Midnight passed, and her determination began shifting into panic. She sent Jake a message, then another, then switched numbers and sent more when he didn't respond. She rehearsed excuses, apologies, and threats in front of the bathroom mirror, unsure which version of herself he might answer. The next evening, Jake and Megan went out for dinner. It was a simple meal, hardly romantic, but when Laura saw a tagged photo of them at a small Italian restaurant, something inside her snapped. She messaged Megan first, then posted cryptic stories about betrayal and fake friends, hoping to guilt Jake into responding. But he didn't, and the silence felt louder than anything he had ever said. Laura spent the next morning packing her apartment, convinced that Jake's silence was a strategic move meant to humiliate her. She told herself she wouldn't care, that she was above all of it, but every hour without a reply felt like fuel poured onto a fire she could no longer control. She opened her social media apps and began typing long paragraphs about emotional abuse and how she had been abandoned without warning. She deleted them, then rewrote them, then posted them anyway. Within minutes, people began reacting, offering sympathy, asking for details she was more than happy to fabricate. She said Jake had a temper. She said he made her feel unsafe. She implied Megan had always been jealous of their relationship and had sabotaged them from the start. The comments poured in, validating her narrative, and Laura felt a surge of satisfaction she hadn't felt in days. But it wasn't enough. She wanted consequences. She wanted Jake to hurt. So she called his workplace. She left a voicemail claiming he had behaved inappropriately toward her during a visit. She exaggerated her voice to sound shaken, adding small sobs between sentences. She hung up before she could think twice. Once the adrenaline faded, the fear set in, but her pride refused to let her take it back. She convinced herself it was justified, that Jake should have thought twice before walking out. Later that afternoon, she messaged her mother and a few select friends, carefully crafting a story where she was the devoted girlfriend blindsided by betrayal. Her mother immediately took her side, posting passive-aggressive quotes online about loyalty and women who deserve better. Her friends followed suit, reposting her stories and indirectly attacking Megan with vague comments about snakes and fake friendships. Jake didn't respond to any of it. Neither did Megan. And their silence only made Laura more erratic. She began checking Jake's socials every hour, convinced he must be hiding something. She noticed Megan liked one of his posts and spiraled again, sending Megan a long, furious message accusing her of manipulating him and preying on vulnerable men. Megan didn't reply. Instead, she blocked Laura. That single notification pushed Laura into another meltdown. She threw her phone onto the couch and let out a scream that echoed through the apartment. In her mind, she was losing control of a story that should have belonged to her. She opened her laptop and began typing a long post accusing Megan of stalking Jake and sabotaging their relationship. She added specific, fabricated details to make it sound believable. When she published it, she felt a twisted sense of triumph. But the reactions this time were different. Some people questioned her timeline. Others pointed out that she had been posting photos with new men barely 24 hours after her breakup. A few even defended Jake. Laura deleted the comments as fast as she could, pretending she hadn't seen them. She refreshed Jake's profile again, hoping for a sign he cared. There was nothing. Meanwhile, Jake and Megan continued living quietly, going to work, cooking dinners together, and sitting on the couch watching movies like nothing outside their walls existed. Their calmness was the loudest rejection Laura had ever felt. It gnawed at her, growing sharper and more unbearable each day. And instead of stepping back, she doubled down, ready to drag anyone into her narrative if it meant avoiding the truth she refused to face. Laura spent the next week obsessing over Jake and Megan, refreshing their profiles, checking tagged photos, and stalking mutual friends for clues about what they were doing. Her frustration built until it finally exploded one Saturday afternoon, when she decided she had to confront them in person. She drove across town to Megan's apartment complex, rehearsing dramatic lines and imagining Jake rushing out to comfort her. Instead, she arrived to find a quiet courtyard and a locked lobby door. She pulled out her phone and immediately went live. Tears streamed down her face as she cried about betrayal, emotional wounds, and how she had been left to suffer alone. She shouted Megan's name, insisting Megan come outside and face the truth. Residents poked their heads out of their doors, confused and uncomfortable. Laura ignored them, continuing her live stream, packing back and forth while narrating her own version of the breakup. When no one responded, she began banging on the glass door, yelling for Jake to come talk to her. Security called the police. Minutes later, 2 officers approached her and asked her to calm down, but Laura raised her voice, claiming she was being mistreated, amplifying her sobs for the camera. The officers eventually guided her off the property and warned her not to return. The live stream ended abruptly, but not before thousands of viewers screen-recorded the entire spectacle. It took only hours for the video to spread across social media, quickly becoming a meme. Laura tried to spin it by posting a long explanation about being in emotional distress, but her followers were split between sympathy and disbelief. That night, she opened a crowdfunding page titled "Recovering from Betrayal," asking for donations to help her rebuild her life. A few strangers contributed small amounts, but most comments mocked her or asked why she was fundraising instead of working. Refusing to accept humiliation, she announced a new plan: a revenge wedding, a solo ceremony meant to symbolize reclaiming her power. She posted photos in a wedding dress, holding a bouquet, smiling through glossy eyes. The internet responded with laughter, duets, and reaction videos. But the worst blow came days later, when several men she had dated during her frantic 24-hour spree began speaking out. They shared screenshots of her messages, videos from her chaotic dates, and stories of her erratic behavior. One of them revealed she had messaged him at 3 a.m, begging him to pretend to be her boyfriend for a live stream. Her reputation nosedived. People from her workplace stumbled onto the posts and reported the chaos to HR. A formal investigation began, dragging up the false accusations she had made about Jake. When the company asked for evidence, Laura panicked, trying to delete her posts, but it was too late. Everything had been archived. She was placed on administrative leave and later terminated for misconduct. Meanwhile, Jake and Megan continued their calm, private life, going out for quiet dinners, walking through farmers' markets, and spending evenings talking on the balcony of their shared apartment. Their relationship grew slowly and naturally, built on honesty instead of performance. When they soft-launched their relationship online with a simple photo of their hands holding coffee cups, Laura saw it instantly. Her heart raced, her chest tightened, and she felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Jake had moved on. Megan had moved in. The stability she once mocked had become someone else's peace. And Laura had become the author of her own downfall. 6 months passed, and Laura convinced herself she had entered a healing era, even though most of her days were spent doom-scrolling, checking Jake's account, and posting vague quotes about resilience. One morning, she announced a new project to her dwindling followers, a YouTube channel called Healing from Betrayal, where she planned to share her journey towards self-love. She filmed her first video in her living room using a ring light and excessive makeup, delivering dramatic monologues about growth while avoiding any mention of her own actions. She cried on camera 3 times, edited none of it out, and uploaded the video with a thumbnail of her holding tissues and staring at the floor. It received views, but mostly from people who already knew her drama. Comments mocked her theatrics, dissected her lies, and compared her to famous reality TV villains. Laura deleted the worst comments, pinned one praising her strength, and pretended not to notice the ratio. Still determined to reclaim attention, she planned something symbolic, a wedding ceremony by herself. She bought a cheap white dress, ordered flowers from an online discount site, and set up her phone in a local park. She marched down an imaginary aisle as strangers stared, muttering their confusion while she repeated vows to love herself more than anyone ever has. The video reached viral status for all the wrong reasons. Reaction channels did dramatic readings. Comment sections overflowed with memes. Clips of her solemnly kissing the air where a groom would stand spread across the internet. But Laura interpreted the attention as support and doubled down, posting daily videos about spiritual alignment and manifesting a higher value partner. She even tried dating again, but none of her new relationships lasted more than a week. One man ghosted her after she ranted about Jake by name during their first dinner. Another left mid-date after she tried to film a healing vlog with him in the background. A third blocked her when she asked if he'd be willing to appear in a staged couple photo shoot for her channel. Each failed attempt sent her spiraling back into angry videos about how modern men were intimidated by strong women. Meanwhile, Jake and Megan quietly built their life together. They moved into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment with big windows and soft morning light. They adopted a small gray cat with oversized paws and named him Milo. They spent weekends rearranging furniture, cooking new recipes, and laughing at old inside jokes that grew into new ones. Their happiness wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, warm, and real. Jake found himself smiling more without even realizing it. Megan wore that contented look people have when they're finally where they're meant to be. They didn't post much online, but when they did, a photo of Milo sleeping on Jake's lap or a picture of them sharing ice cream in the sun, Laura saw it instantly. Every image felt like a punch to her chest, a reminder that the life she had thrown away was thriving in someone else's hands. She tried to dismiss it, tried to tell herself Jake was pretending, that Megan was manipulating him, that it wasn't real. But deep down she knew. The peace she once took for granted had found a new home. And she was left chasing echoes of a stability she had never appreciated when she had it. 2 years after the breakup, Laura crafted a brand new persona online, convinced she had finally risen above the drama. She returned to dating apps with a curated gallery of edited photos and a bio describing herself as emotionally evolved and seeking only high-value partners. Within days, she began messaging a man named Daniel, who introduced himself as a future doctor. Laura latched onto the phrase instantly, imagining a polished, wealthy professional who would silence her critics and prove she had upgraded. She posted hints about a new chapter, shared cropped photos of their hands, and implied she was dating someone far more successful than Jake ever could be. Her dwindling audience perked up, leaving comments asking for details, which she fed them with dramatic pauses and vague statements. After only a month, she announced she was getting married. She showcased a ring that clearly wasn't real gold and posted countdown graphics with inspirational quotes. Behind the scenes, though, her relationship was already unraveling. Daniel wasn't a doctor. He wasn't even close. He was a second-year medical student juggling loans, part-time jobs, and a demanding schedule. He told her the truth early on, but Laura dismissed it, insisting he didn't need to hide his success, twisting his clarification into modesty. When she pressured him into planning an extravagant wedding he couldn't afford, he finally explained the situation again, more firmly this time. Laura refused to accept it. She screamed, accused him of lying, insisted he was trying to embarrass her publicly, and demanded he at least play along for her channel. Daniel ended the relationship the same night. The next morning, screenshots of their conversations leaked online from a burner account, messages showing Laura pressuring him to maintain the doctor narrative so she could restore her image. Her wedding announcement collapsed overnight. She scrambled to take down videos, blocked dozens of commenters, and went private on multiple platforms. But the damage was permanent. In desperation, she returned to dating apps, cycling through matches while blaming Jake and Megan for shattering her self-worth and making it impossible to trust again. She complained about them in group chats, in DMs to strangers, even in her therapy-themed posts. Meanwhile, Jake's life moved in a direction that felt like the opposite of everything Laura had spiraled into. He had been saving for months, searching for something simple but meaningful. One quiet evening, on the balcony of their apartment with Milo curled at their feet, Jake pulled out a small velvet ring box. He didn't make a speech. He didn't rehearse lines. He simply asked Megan if she wanted to marry him. She said yes with tears in her eyes, hugging him with the kind of warmth that comes from years of choosing each other. The ring wasn't flashy. It wasn't expensive. But it fit her perfectly, because it came from someone who had learned that love didn't need spectacle to be real. They began planning a modest wedding with close friends, homemade food, and hand-picked flowers. No live streams. No drama. Just two people building a life out of peace instead of chaos. When Laura eventually stumbled upon their engagement photo, a soft, candid shot of them laughing together, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't jealousy she felt. It was the crushing awareness that while she had chased illusions, everyone else had simply moved forward. And the 24 hours she thought she could control had turned into 730 days of consequences she never imagined. Laura stood in the quiet apartment, realizing the silence felt heavier than any argument they had ever had. She walked through each room slowly, seeing traces of Jake everywhere, from the mug he always used to the jacket he forgot to take. For the first time, she admitted to herself that she had pushed too hard, too often, mistaking dominance for strength and pride for self-worth. She sat on the couch and replayed every moment of their downfall, feeling the weight of her own words settle like stones in her chest. The message from Jake stayed unread on her phone, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't know how to face what she had done. Outside, life moved on, but inside, Laura confronted the truth that winning meant nothing if she had to lose him to prove a point. She finally picked up her phone, whispering an apology to the empty room, hoping it wasn't too late to say it to him instead.